So you might have come across one or two learning strategies. You might even know 4 to 5 learning strategies. But how about having 15 different evidence-based learning strategies that you can apply every single time you learn a topic? That's GAMT's DL framework. In my previous videos, I've discussed this GAMT DL framework in detail, which incorporates 15 different evidence-based learning techniques all under one big umbrella. In this video, we're going to talk about 2 of those 15 evidence-based learning techniques that's going to supercharge your learning. So let's jump in. Hi all, welcome to GAMTPEDIA. My name is Dr. Karthik, and for people who are new to this channel, I'm an assistant professor in anesthesiology working in Dublin, Ireland. This channel is all about the transformative power of Glyph-Assisted Memory Technique, or GAMT. Learning is a multifaceted journey, and it's not just about memorization. In this channel, we look at all aspects of this journey, right from creating a GAMT to applying the GAMT learning framework, all the way to developing effective recall strategies. So let's jump in. One of the problems in learning about learning is that you come across so many different techniques, right? It can very quickly get exhausting. Knowing a lot of techniques is good, right? Don't get me wrong, but applying them consistently every time you learn is a big challenge. John Hattie, a renowned New Zealand researcher in educational field, has kind of listed around 357 things that can influence learning. We'll come back to John Hattie later in this video. And then of the 357 things that he listed, 66 factors are under the control of students. 66, that's kind of a huge number, right? You can very easily say how this can become very, very exhausting, right? That's where framework comes in. Frameworks are great. For example, Charlie Munger used to use frameworks all the time. There are around 80 mental models that's what he used to call them. Bill Gates has his own framework on SMART for goal setting. Tim Ferriss has DISSS framework, and so on and so on. So the frameworks are great too, where you can put together a lot of different concepts and ideas into one single framework, which allows you to apply it very efficiently, right? The GAMT DL framework, what it does is it incorporates 15 different evidence-based learning tools all under one single umbrella. Every time you sit down to learn, all you have to do is just apply this framework to every single topic. You're basically applying all the principles of these 15 different learning techniques all in one go without having to remember each and every one of them. When you look at the GAMT DL framework, Zone 3 is where you ask why, what, when, how, and what questions, right? That's the question zone. That's when you ask all these interrogative questions to explore deep into this topic. This is the zone which applies 2 of the principles that we're going to discuss today. The first one is called Elaborative Interrogation. The second one is self-verbalization and self-questioning. Elaborative interrogation is pretty simple. It's when you read a topic, you ask a lot of why, when, what, how questions to understand more deeply about that particular topic. That's it. It's very simple. And this is combined with ChatGPT. The results are amazing. When you're using elaborative interrogation, there are 2 things that you need to keep in mind. The first thing is you should be the one who should be generating the questions. That's very important. The second thing is you need to do what is called deep processing. So we'll explain the 2 things now. So the first concept is that the questions should come from you. So what do I mean by that? This comes from a famous study on elaborative interrogation techniques by Presti as early as 1987. I kind of popularized this technique at that time, and lots of evidence to support this technique, its effect in learning, right? So when this study came out in 1987, what they did basically, right, they took a bunch of students, they gave them a set of 24 statements to remember. The statements were something like this: a hungry man got into the car, the strong man carried bricks, the old woman went to bed early, etc. Right? Then they divided the students into 3 groups. The first group were just given these statements and they were asked to read them and try to remember them. The second group, they were given these statements and then they're given an explanation as to why that statement happens. For example, when they say a hungry man got into the car because he wanted to drive to a restaurant, right? A strong man carried the bricks because he was the strongest in the team that is present and they were in the construction area, so on and so forth, right? So in the second group, researchers gave them the explanation for the particular statement. What they asked the students in the third group to do was to generate their questions, specifically why questions on that particular statements, and speculate on the answers. When you get a statement like this, a hungry man got into the car, the questions that you'd like to ask is, why did the hungry man get into the car? You're allowed to speculate an answer for that, and you say, okay, so why the hungry man got into the car because he's going to go to a restaurant. So this answer is coming from you. The researchers are not giving you the answers. They're just guiding you to ask questions. So third group, you ask the questions and you generate the answers, right? After these 3 groups are given enough time, they were then brought back to test them on how well they remember all the 24 statements. And as you would expect, the group 3, who actually asked the questions on the given statement, performed significantly better than the other 2 groups. Something about the students generating their own questions on the given sentence seems to make the difference. It's not just the explanation, it's the fact that the students are asking the questions is what improved their retention of that particular statement. That's very interesting, right? The second point that you need to understand in elaborative interrogation is called deep processing. So what do I mean by that? Say, for example, you're reading about BNP in heart failure. BNP is a brain natriuretic peptide. It's a lab value that you measure in the blood test, and if the value is high, it signifies heart failure, right? So let's say you're reading about BNP. You ask the questions, the why questions that you ask shouldn't be very superficial. Say, for example, you shouldn't ask something like, what conditions does BNP increase? And then the answer is going to be, oh yeah, BNP is going to be raised in heart failure. Your question should be, why does the BNP increase in heart failure? You get an answer like, okay, so when the myocardium stretches, it releases BNP, and that's why you get increase in BNP in heart failure. You shouldn't stop there. So that's the first layer of questioning. You should go down deeper. The next question you're going to ask is, why does the stretch of myocardium causes a release in BNP? Then you're going to find an answer that is mechanical ion-gated channels, calcium channels, that causes the release of BNP. And then the next question you're going to ask is, what other parts of the body have mechanical ion-gated channels, so on and so forth. So you get the idea, right? So the why question shouldn't be just used as a tool for superficial learning, but it should be used as a tool to go deeper into the knowledge base that you're trying to learn. So the more deeper you go, better are the chances for you to retain that information in the long run. So now we know how elaborative interrogation works, but what's the evidence? There are loads of evidence on this particular technique. It's a very well-known technique in the learning circles, and there's loads of published studies, and you can see through them. Put together all the resources that I've discussed in this particular video in a Notion page that I shared the link below in the description. So please do have a look when you finish watching the video. I'll come back to John Hattie here. So John Hattie, as I told you before, is a researcher from New Zealand in education field. He did a very interesting thing. So normally when you do research, right, you publish a paper, and there are lots and lots of literature published on the learning strategies. Say, for example, if you take homework, for example, right, there are probably hundreds and thousands of studies published on homework and their efficacy and how it helps students, etc., etc. So what the researchers generally do when you have such a lot of information is they combine a lot of these small studies into what is called meta-analysis, so that they can synthesize the information for us to understand a bit easier. So what John Hattie did, he went one level up. So he combined all the meta-analysis on a particular topic and did what is called meta-synthesis. So the meta-synthesis allowed him to really condense information from a very large number of studies. He first published his book in 2008 called Visible Learning, where he looked at 800 meta-analysis involving more than 83 million students, right? And he listed 132 factors that can impact learning students, right? So he followed it up with a Visible Learning sequel in 2023, where he looked at 1,600 meta-analysis involving 300 million students. That's a lot of students, right? And then this time he listed around 357 factors that could affect learning, or that could change learning for better or for worse, right? So it can be quite overwhelming to capture all the details of these multiple studies on a given factor. So what he did is describe them in terms of effect size. So he has an hinge point, which is of an effect size of 0.4. Any technique that has an effect size of more than 0.4 can significantly accelerate one's learning. Anything less than 0.4 doesn't really have a huge impact. Anything that's negative can actually have a negative impact on student learning, right? So the effect size for elaborative interrogation is around 0.66. So that's more greater than 0.4, and it is significantly higher. So why does it happen? It's a very simple technique, right? So you're just asking why, what, how questions get deeper into learning. So why such a simple thing can actually increase the retention of knowledge significantly? The answer lies is it increases curiosity. Anytime you ask why, you become curious because you want to know the answer. Even no matter how dull the topic is, the moment you ask why, your curiosity goes up to the next level, and that's a very key ingredient to learning. The curiosity increases the dopamine levels, which kind of really forms a very nice milieu in your neural circuit to enhance knowledge retention. So what you're doing here, just by asking the why question, you're actually increasing the curiosity levels in your brain at a micro level, which in turn increases the knowledge retention. Not only that, you also, by asking the why question, getting into more deeper knowledge base of that particular topic, and that allows you to establish connection across multiple domains. So you're actually interlinking between other knowledge that you might have around that particular topic, which establishes very strong connections for you to allow to retain the knowledge for a longer period of time. The second learning method is self-verbalization and self-questioning. So self-verbalization is talking about learning that is happening, and typically it involves you summarizing the information that you learned so far verbally, right? That's self-verbalization. Self-questioning is very similar to elaborative interrogation, but the context is slightly different. For example, let's take BNP as an example, right? So you learn about BNP. So initially you're in the zone 3 of the GAMT framework. You're asking a lot of why, what, when, how questions. You have a very deep, very strong understanding of that particular topic, right? And then you go to the self-questioning zone where you take a step back, right? And then ask, okay, so I read this PNP or I learned PNP, right? Did I understand it? And say, yeah, I think I understand well. And you can ask, is there any gaps in my knowledge of PNP? And say, actually, I understood all the concepts, but actually I don't know how it's actually measured in the lab. I don't know how they actually use, what measurements do they use in the lab to measure this. And then you might also say something like, oh, I actually don't know which bottles to send this blood sample in. If I'm in the A&E and treating a patient with cardiac failure, if I want to send BNP samples, what color bottles should I send the samples in, etc. So basically what you're doing is you're asking questions about the learning process. So you're asking questions at the metacognition level. So that is self-questioning, right? And the other thing you can ask is, do I have enough information that allows me to apply this knowledge in practice? So, these are the questions that you ask verbally out loud, and then you answer the questions. The answering the questions is actually self-verbalization because you're summarizing the information. And then the question that you generate is the self-questioning aspect of it, right? That's the whole concept of self-verbalization and self-questioning. This sounds very simple as well, again, but it's a very powerful technique as well. So it has been shown multiple times across different learners and different subjects that it works consistently well. So John Hattie's metasynthesis again shows an effect size of 0.53, which again is significant. And it's a very powerful tool. In fact, Harvard has a whole course on best practices for question formulation for students, right? And so does many of the universities. So it's a very effective technique. So these two, the elaborative interrogation and the self-verbalization, self-questioning, are very efficient tools, very easy to apply tools when you're learning any topic. Now, this has been integrated into Zone 3 in the GAMT DL framework. My aim here is to keep things very simple. So when you're in Zone 3, ask a lot of why, what, when, and how questions. It's important that you generate the questions. You can use ChatGPT to get the answers, but you should generate the questions. Don't use these questions to just get to the surface level of the topic. Dig deeper into the topic. Once you've done that, you do what is called self-questioning, where you take a step back, take a look at the overall picture to ask yourself, did you understand the topic? Are there any gaps in the knowledge? Do I have to learn anything more to apply this knowledge in practice, etc.? We certainly covered Zone 3 with these two powerful techniques, right? So what about the other zones? Each zone can have more than one learning technique associated with it. In the same way, a learning technique can apply to multiple zones at the same time. I've described to you 2 of the 15 evidence-based learning strategies that are incorporated into the GAMT framework. This is just to give you an idea of the immensity of the GAMT framework and the power it has and how it can enhance your learning immensely. I'll be back with more. I have already covered a few medical topics. You can check them out in this video below. And there's a free Notion page in which I've shared all the details that I've described in this video and down in the description below. Please don't forget to access that. And there's a Notion affiliate link as well. Please do check it out. It's an awesome note-taking app, especially for students. It's free for use as well. See you in the next video. Till then, learn it, GAMT it. Bye.
Learn it, GAMT it, feel the beat. In every learning zone, you'll reach the feed. From cliffs to riches, you ditch the glitches.